Abkhaz flank was, to put it briefly, an experience. It was by far the hardest physical test I've ever had in my life. Compared to the almost 10 other Milsim West that I've been to, it was a challenge compared to those events. So today I want to share with you some of the tips that I learned from that game so that you can apply it to your next Milsim West experience. Now, the Abkhaz AO in West Virginia, if you haven't been there before, this is my second time, combines some of the hardest aspects of other Milsim West AOs. It not only has a ton of space, like a lot of the ones you'll see on the West Coast, but it also has a lot of elevation change, even worse than, say, the Balkar AO in Pennsylvania for perspective. So you've got to move a lot and you've got to go up and down hills a lot, which is one of the biggest challenges that players are going to be facing at this AO. So the first thing that I learned at this game, the biggest advice that I'd have, has to do with rucking, which is something we've talked about before on the channel, but this was by far the worst infill that I have ever done. It wasn't that far, as the crow flies, maybe 2 to 3 miles or so, but if you're the type of player who's only ever been to urban Milsim West, like the Super Bowl, where the ruck-in is maybe 500 meters or less, this is a challenge, and it's one of those things that makes a lot of players drop on day one, so it's why I want to talk about it first. I think something that you can do as a player, if you're unsure about your rucking ability, or maybe you're already in pretty good shape, is you've got to prepare before the event. You've got to exercise a little bit, know your limits, so then you'll be prepared for the game. So for me personally, Milsim West is a really good encouragement to get back into the gym. I like being able to have a goal that I am working towards, otherwise I get kind of lazy about going to the gym, admittedly, but knowing that there's a Milsim West on the horizon, that really, puts a fire under me, because I'd rather suffer in the gym, in the YMCA or the Planet Fitness or wherever you go. I'd rather suffer there than suffer in front of all my friends and not be able to keep up at the Milsim West game that I probably paid like $200 for. So I spent a lot of time in the gym preparing for this game, and because I know that there's a lot of elevation change, I use the Stairmaster a lot, I do things like that, kind of preparing for what I'd experience on the field. But what I learned ultimately, and why I stopped going to the gym as much, is there is no better practice than doing the real thing. So my advice would be, if you're worried about your rucking and your conditioning, which is a big part of Milsim West and where most players fail, the airsofting isn't very hard, go out and ruck somewhere that you think is going to be as physically demanding, preferably more physically demanding, than the AO that you are going to play at. And so I found near me, it's about 30 minutes away, just a place, it's pretty much a straight, throwing your face at the hill and going upwards. And I would do that like 2 or 3 times a week. And it got a little boring, admittedly, because there's only one trail up the mountain. But doing that helped prepare me for this game. And if I wasn't doing that regularly, and I just kind of walked into this AO not knowing what to expect, I would have gotten smoked. It would not have been a good time for me. Like I said, that was the gnarliest insertion that I've ever had. I remember saying to my cadre, Justin, I was like, man, that was devious what you put us through. So again, going back to rucking, I would recommend actually doing it. Again, there's no replacement for the real thing. And one of the hard things for most people is going to be, you can get good at rucking, you can get comfortable with your ruck on, but then the addition of your load-bearing equipment, whether it be a chest rig, a belt type setup, or a plate carrier, is going to change how it rides on your body. So you should get comfortable with that as well. For me at this event, I was running a Eagle Industries RRV, and that put some weird pressure points on my back that I don't get when I'm just wearing the ruck by itself, which was something that I admittedly did not prepare much for. It may be fixable by adjusting my straps or where the harness lays for the RRV. However, that's something that I ran into. If you're wearing body armor, it's absolutely going to change how the ruck fits your body, the way that it kind of interfaces with the plate. If you have anything on your back panel, that's all going to distribute that weight differently on your back than when you're doing it without it. And I know that some of you either have the ability to go somewhere where you won't see other people and you can be a nerd in your chest rig or your plate carrier, or you just don't care if people see you in that type of stuff. That's a little bit beyond me. But that is something that you got to be aware of, is what you're wearing to the airsoft field is going to change how your ruck fits on your body. Another great example was my helmet. And I run a pretty basic ACH style helmet, but then I have a counterweight on the back. what I discovered is the counterweight goes far enough back to hit the top of my ruck. So if I'm looking up, say if I'm climbing upwards, I actually can't have full mobility to go back and forth with my head, which was a big issue when I was climbing, you know, like a 60-degree incline and I was on my hands and knees. So first thing that I would stress is going to be, you know, practice with your ruck, get more than comfortable with it. I'd say carry more during like your practice than what you're going to have at the game. My ruck with water from Milsim West weighs about 30 pounds. I was practicing with 40 to 45 on any given day, just to make sure that like when I get out there and it's a little bit worse, as we'll talk about in a second, you're prepared for it and it's not catching you off guard. The second lesson that I learned at this game, which I think is applicable to a lot of people, is your sleep system. And it's kind of like wearing the ruck with body armor, like we talked about a second ago. It's not something that you're going to get to practice with a lot. Unless you're like actively homeless, you're probably not sleeping in your Milsim West sustainment gear all the time. But getting some reps setting it up. You know, you might look a little weird doing a campground, you know, or if you're lucky enough to own a house, go in your backyard and do it for a night on a Saturday. Practicing with that and practicing your ability to sleep in your sleep system while it's actively raining is super important. What happened to me on Sunday is we knew it was going to rain overnight and we knew it was going to pour. And luckily we had a bunch of like plastic folding tables at our disposal because of the AO. So a lot of us set those up above where we'd be sleeping and putting them down below, you know, for something to sleep on to avoid the rain. Well, I woke up at 4 in the morning and I'm like, oh, that's a weird feeling. The inside of my bivy bag was wet. I have a USGI bivy, and I also have a 40-degree sleeping bag that I put in there just because I was scarred by last year where it turned out to be like 25 degrees at night and I was a chilly boy. What I didn't have, which is something I'll always carry for any sort of like outdoor Milsim West, and I guess what I mean by that is any sort of like wooded AO where you're guaranteed to not be sleeping inside of a building, is a tarp. Now you can go to Harbor Freight and get them for $5. They're going to be pretty big and not packed down very easy. You can spend a little bit more money and be able to get something that packs down better. Just get something so that you have a foolproof rain plan while you sleep, because what ultimately ended up happening is those tables that were above me, even with a poncho over the crease, water still got in and dripped on me, and the table that I was sleeping on wasn't totally flat, probably because there was, you know, a 170-pound human on it. The water pooled up, and then eventually I must have turned in the night, and that's how it got into the waterproof bivy sack. And then it just kind of dripped on top of me, and I was a miserable boy till about 6:30 when we got up for our rotation. So that's one of the other big things that I would say is rain. I feel like rain knocks out just as many people at Milsim West as the actual ruck in. So making sure that your sleeping system is set up for it is very important. I'd also say it's really important to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You know, like my back was completely wet with cold water. I knew if I rolled around, you know, like the other side that my chest would. And there was a point where I just had to accept that. I'm like, all right, well, you know, it's Sunday morning. I'm not quitting from Milsim West. That's cringe. I'm just going to suffer. And it was fine, you know, like as soon as I had an opportunity to, I changed my clothes. But making sure that you're prepared for the rain, and then also making sure that you have something good for when you're moving as well. I have a USGI Gore-Tex, but sometimes, you know, having too much rain protection is not good, because on the other end of the spectrum, if you're wearing your Gore-Tex and you've also got warming layers on, you're gonna sweat. So even if you are not getting, you know, if you're getting rained on and the Gore-Tex is stopping the rain, having the warmer layers is gonna make you sweat, which gets you wet, which is arguably just as bad. And then the third thing that I want to talk about is maybe something that just applies to me, but it was kind of like an eye-opener for me Sunday morning. Milsim West allows riflemen to use full auto, which I will admit most of the games that I go to, even the games that I host, riflemen are locked to semi-auto. However, the ability to use full auto as a rifleman is something that you need to take advantage of, because something that I was doing a lot on Friday and on Saturday was I was like, oh, I gotta conserve my ammo, which is maybe true on your initial allotment of 500 BBs, but once you're getting a resupply, and you know, maybe I don't mean to game the game or anything, but I've been to enough Milsim West, I've hosted enough events of my own to kind of know that like, you're gonna get more ammo. But when I was just in semi trying to conserve my shots, I wasn't really getting a lot of kills because, you know, there's brush and other things like that, or just distance between me and the other player. But as soon as I realized, like, I should just switch to full auto, I was doing significantly better. And again, because you're going to get resupply, take advantage of that mechanic. You know, like obviously, you know, the situation will dictate how you engage. If you're taking pot shots at 200 feet away and you might hit them, you know, you're on the edge of airsoft range, go semi. Don't waste your ammo. But when you know that that could be the difference between getting somebody out and not getting somebody out, flip the switch. Go to full auto, especially if you're a machine gunner. Like, you are the priority for ammo distribution. If you've got a medium or a light machine gun, you know, use up your rounds. At the end of a firefight, whether or not you win or lose it, the machine gun should never be green on ammo. Use what you have because you're a force multiplier. And once you have all the riflemen also using full auto, that's going to allow you to get fire superiority over the other team. So even if you're in a bad situation, say you get ambushed, you know, your classic L-shaped ambush, and you're in a bad spot, full auto could help you, you know, turn the tide of that versus your enemies who aren't firing as fast. Getting that superiority and being able to repel them back is huge, and it's something that I really just didn't think about as a player until Sunday morning. And then guess what? As soon as I started using full auto and getting a little bit more aggressive with my fire, I was doing a lot better. But those are just a few of the things that I learned at Milsim West, the Abkhaz flank. Again, this was the hardest Milsim West that I have ever been to. And compared to my nearly 10 events with them, it was one of the most fun that I have ever had. It's one of those types of fun where, like, it sucked in the moment. Like, again, that was the most physically demanding thing that I've ever done. But God, it felt really cool that I was able to accomplish that and accomplish that with all of my friends. So Milsim West, my message to you, Brian, and everybody else there, Josh Warren, go back to that AO. Everybody seems to love it. Like, please return there. It is so cool. But yeah, that is going to do it for today's video with some of the lessons that I learned at Milsim West. I do just want to say a quick thank you to our channel members, because without their support, me being able to go to this game simply would not be possible. Channel members are, you know, they're one of those things that, like, I talk about a lot on the channel, but I really just want to break down what they do for the BB Warrior. If it wasn't for the channel members' support each month, I wouldn't be able to afford to go out to airsoft games, to be able to meet you guys, the viewers, and ultimately to be able to make these videos. So, you know, from the bottom of my heart, I am so appreciative of everybody that has supported this channel for over 10 years at this point. And channel members also get some cool things in return. They get to watch videos just like this one earlier than everybody else. They get a guaranteed spot in the Roast My Kit series. They get exclusive access on the Discord, and there's even so much more that I can't mention all in one video. But if you want to learn about becoming a channel member and helping to support the Baby Warrior, well, you can click the join button down below. There's also a link in the description as well, depending what type of device that you are on. But I gotta ask all of you, if you've been to a lot of Milsim West, or maybe it was your first, what humbled you? You know, like, what experience was a really good learning experience that you wish that you knew going into that game? Because I'm sure that if you've experienced it, or I experienced it, somebody else would love to know about that before their first Milsim West. So leave a comment down below with your best advice from Milsim West. But that's going to do it for today's video. My name is Lane, and I'll see you all next time.